You are on Tips and Streams with your host, Coca.
What's good, everyone? Welcome back to Tips and Streams. I'm Koken, and I hope you're doing well and feeling locked in wherever you're listening from. All right, let's get to the daily picks. I've got 4 NBA matchups on the card today, so buckle up. We're diving straight into the action. The first prediction for today's NBA games is for the game between the Indiana Pacers and the Brooklyn Nets. I'm looking at this matchup through one lens: legs, momentum, and who's actually built to survive the ugly parts of a midweek grind. Indiana rolls into Brooklyn in a spot I never love backing, a short rest situation, their third game in 4 nights, and the last stop before the All-Star break. That's the kind of scheduling math that quietly wrecks defensive rotations, turns closeouts into flybys, and makes every loose ball feel optional in the fourth quarter. Brooklyn, on the other hand, is finally showing a pulse. Even in a season that's been rough overall, the Nets have stacked back-to-back wins and back-to-back covers. And that matters because confidence is real in this league. When a team that's been living in the mud suddenly sees a couple of shots go down, the pace looks cleaner, the ball pops, and role players stop thinking so much. In that win over Chicago, Brooklyn's three-point shooting was the story, 48% from deep, and it wasn't just random heat-check basketball. They generated looks that didn't feel forced, and when this team gets to play in rhythm, they don't have to be an elite offense to be dangerous at home. Now, the headline everyone's watching is Michael Porter Jr. He's dealing with a knee issue, and he's questionable, and with the break coming up, I can absolutely see Brooklyn taking the cautious route. But here's the key for me. The Nets have already shown they can win without him. They beat the Bulls, they handled the Wizards, and they did it by leaning into what they do best: compete defensively, run when they can, and let their bigs set the tone inside. Nick Claxton has been the anchor and the finisher, and when he's active on both ends, Brooklyn's floor rises because they're not relying on pure shot making to stay afloat. Indiana's path is different. The Pacers can score, and when their ball movement is sharp, they can light up a scoreboard fast. They just had that wild overtime win against New York, and they shot the ball well from deep in that one. But I don't like what that kind of emotional, high-minute win can do to a team on the very next night, especially on the road. You cash that big moment, and then your body asks for payment the next evening. Add in a banged-up injury report, and it gets harder to trust Indiana to bring the same punch for 4 full quarters. This game also has a sneaky script factor. Brooklyn has been the better defensive group by the numbers provided, and Indiana has been allowing too many efficient looks. If the Nets can keep Indiana from living at the rim and force them into tougher jumpers late in the clock, that's where fatigue shows up the loudest. I'm expecting a tight game early, but the swing point for me is the fourth quarter. Fresher legs at home, more defensive connectivity, and a Pacers team that's ripe for a flat finish before the break. So I'm keeping my pick for the buzzer, and here it is. My prediction is I'm taking the Brooklyn Nets to win and cover the 3.5-point spread at home against the Indiana Pacers. Today's second prediction is for the game between the Portland Trail Blazers and Minnesota Timberwolves. When Portland walks into Minnesota, I'm not looking at the names first. I'm looking at the vibe, the tempo, and the number. And that number matters tonight. A full 7 points. That's a big cushion in a matchup where I don't fully trust the home team to stay locked in for 48 minutes. Let me be real. Minnesota has burned me all season. One night, they look like a playoff machine. The next night, they're playing like the game is optional. I've watched them flip personalities depending on the matchup, smash a solid team, then sleepwalk at home the next time out. Even after that big win over Atlanta, I'm still not sprinting to the window to lay points with them. This squad can score, but they've also had stretches where the defensive edge disappears, and they start trading buckets like it's a practice run. Now, on the other side, Portland is coming in with the kind of energy I respect. A young group playing fast, letting it fly, and stacking confidence. The recent stretch tells me something. They snapped out of an ugly skid and responded with real basketball, not lucky bounces. Against Philadelphia, they didn't just win. They bombed away from deep and turned the game into a track meet they could control. If a team is willing to put up that many threes, and they're also crashing the glass, that's a problem for any favorite, because it creates extra possessions and wild scoring swings. The key for me is Deni Avdija being active and productive again. When he's right, Portland has a steady two-way connector who can score, rebound, and keep the offense from getting stuck. That matters a ton on the road, because when the crowd swings and the whistles get loud, you need somebody who can calm the possession down and still make a play. And Portland's role guys have been giving them real punch, especially when their shooting rhythm turns the court into a runway. Minnesota, meanwhile, is still built around Anthony Edwards setting the tone. He can take over any game, downhill force, tough shot maker, and he can flip momentum in 3 possessions. But if the Timberwolves don't bring consistent resistance defensively, Portland can hang around long enough for that spread to get shaky. And I'm also watching Minnesota's pattern. They've had games where they look comfortable and still let the opponent hang around in the fourth. That's how favorites fail covers, not always by losing, but by winning without separation. Head-to-head earlier this season was tight, and that's another reason I'm not treating 7 points like it's nothing. If Portland can push pace, chuck confidently, and win the hustle categories even in small bursts, they don't need to be perfect. They just need to keep this in the same zip code. So I'm not coming in here calling for fireworks or trying to be cute with a total. I'm calling it the way I see it. Portland has enough shooting volume, enough pace, and enough fight to make this uncomfortable for a Minnesota team I still can't fully trust to play clean, focused, cover-style basketball from start to finish. My money is on the Trailblazers to cover the 7-point spread against the Timberwolves. I'm riding with the road dog, not because Minnesota can't win, but because I see Portland hanging in this fight deep into the fourth. The third prediction for today is for the game between the New York Knicks and Philadelphia 76ers. When I handicap Knicks Sixers, I start with the spot, not the names on the jerseys. This one screams scheduling tax on New York. The Knicks are walking into Philly on the second night of a back-to-back, and not the clean kind either. They just had an overtime grind where their main engine guys were logged heavily. In my experience, that extra 5 minutes shows up late, and it usually shows up on the defensive end first. Closeouts get a step slower, box-outs turn into reach-ins, and those second-chance scrambles start going the other way. Philadelphia's angle is the opposite. The Sixers finally get to sleep in their own beds after a long trip, and they're coming off a game where they got punched in the mouth. I love that situation for a response game, because teams tend to tighten the screws when they're back home and embarrassed. And the way Philly plays, that matters. They can turn one good stop into a runway, and they've got a lead guard who lives for tempo pressure. Now, the injury report is the big lever here, and I'm not ignoring it. Philadelphia has key names listed as questionable, and New York has its own availability cloud. So my read isn't "this is easy." My read is the structure of the matchup still leans Philly because the Knicks are the team dealing with fatigue, travel, and a short turnaround. On court, I'm watching 2 things. First, pace control. If the Sixers push early, they can force New York's legs to chase, and that's when the Knicks' defensive efficiency starts to leak. Second, who wins the physical minutes? New York can rebound with anybody, but when you're coming off an overtime game, those 50-50 balls start turning into 60-40 balls for the fresher team. Philly doesn't need perfection. They just need to keep turning possessions into pressure. The trends and context back that up. New York just gave up a highly efficient shooting night to Indiana, and that's not the timing you want when you're about to face a team that can score in bursts. Meanwhile, Philadelphia has been steady enough against the number overall, and this is the kind of spot where the market is reacting to rest and travel, not just raw talent. So here's how I see it playing out. New York will have stretches where the shot making is real. They've got creators, they've got spacing, and they can score in bunches. But I expect the game to swing in the later portions when the Knicks defense starts arriving a half beat late, and Philly turns that into clean looks and free points in transition. And now, I'll keep the pick for the clutch, like I always do. I'm taking the Philadelphia 76ers to cover the 3.5 point spread against the Los Angeles Lakers in Los Angeles. Today's last prediction is for the game between the Detroit Pistons and Toronto Raptors. I'm looking at Pistons Raptors in Toronto, and I'm not treating it like a simple best team wins spot. This one has layers, form, matchups, and that little cloud hanging over Detroit after the Charlotte game got chippy. The Pistons still handled business in that 110-104 win, but the aftertaste matters because rotation stability is everything when you're laying points on the road. Let's start with Toronto, because the Raptors aren't just hanging around lately. They've been stacking wins and covers. What jumps off the page to me is how they've been deciding games in the middle quarters. When they get stops, they don't walk it up. They turn rebounds into runway and sprint into points before the defense gets set. That's not just pace talk. That's identity. And when they're confident, you can see it in the way multiple guys are flowing into rhythm, not just one player trying to rescue the offense. Scotty Barnes is the engine for that style. I'm watching his stat lines, and it screams stuff the box, tilt the floor. He rebounds, he pushes, he makes plays, and he protects the rim from the wing spot. Then you've got Brandon Ingram giving them that half-court bailout, the kind of scorer who can get you a clean look late in the clock when the defense has finally gotten back. And R.J. Barrett is the steady pressure release. He attacks, he keeps the defense honest, and he's not afraid of contact in the paint. Toronto's not living off smoke and mirrors either. They've been defending at a real level and turning that defense into offense. That matters against a Detroit team that thrives when it can impose physicality. Now Detroit. I've got to give them respect. The Pistons have been playing like the class of the East, and they've shown they can win in different ways. Sometimes it's a Cade Cunningham masterclass, that 33-point, 9-rebound, 7-assist type of night, where he's reading the floor like a veteran quarterback. Other times it's a balance, bodies coming in waves, everybody touching the ball, and the defense doing the heavy lifting. Their backbone is that defensive presence inside, contesting at the rim, protecting the paint, and making opponents feel every drive. Even when their outside shooting isn't falling, they can still win because they turn the game into a grind. But here's the swing factor for me. Detroit's frontcourt situation is unstable right now. Between the fallout from the Hornets game and the way suspensions can pop up at the worst time, there's a real chance Detroit isn't at full rotation strength. And if Toronto doesn't have to deal with Detroit's usual rebounding muscle and paint punishment for a full night, that changes the geometry of the game. It gives the Raptors a cleaner path to run, it gives Barnes more room to work, and it keeps Toronto from getting swallowed at the rim. I'm also not ignoring the history. Detroit has had Toronto's number, and that's real. But spreads aren't about last season's storyline. They're about tonight's script. This is the first meeting of the season, in Toronto, with the Raptors playing their best basketball in a while, and Detroit potentially looking at the calendar with an extended break ahead. In spots like that, I always ask myself, who is more likely to bring playoff-level urgency for 48 minutes? At home, with momentum and a style that can punish any sloppy transition defense, Toronto feels like the team that's going to play sharper. So I'm saving my call for the buzzer, just like I always do. My prediction is the Raptors to cover the 3-point spread in Toronto. I'm riding with Toronto to keep it tight, win the effort plays, and cash the number at home.